I'm the director of Reedsburg ArtsLink. I use she, her pronouns. And as you may have guessed from our name, I live in a community that our First Peoples, the Ho-Chunk, called Wanagomik Chinook, which translates roughly to Land of Cemeteries. And I want to shout out to my friend Melanie, director of the Little Eagle Arts Foundation, who helped me learn these Ho-Chunk words just this last Saturday. But as you can guess from our name, the European immigrants who settled in our area, largely German, gave our community the name Reedsburg after that settler with that surname, Reed. So probably a little bit more background than you need, but I grew up in a dairy farm outside of Reedsburg, went to Catholic grade school, and what was then Webb High School in Reedsburg. Went to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and got a Bachelor of Science in a degree that I never used. After I graduated from college, I lived in Tokyo for a year and then lived in major metro areas in the United States for roughly 20 years of my life, doing publishing work and nonprofit work. And then I returned to my hometown to be with my now husband and be also closer to my aging parents. But while I was so I've kind of lived both experiences, the urban and the rural. But while living in major metro areas, New York and Minneapolis, I saw how quickly the arts could transform communities for the better. And I wondered when I moved back to Reedsburg, whether that could happen in rural communities as well. Shortly after I moved back to Reedsburg, I became involved with the Worm Farm Institute, which, as many of you may know, produces the Farm Art Detour. And after being on their board and working on staff for a year for that project and event, I co-founded Reedsburg ArtsLink in 2014 with 2 other local artists. So we developed Reedsburg ArtsLink as a multidisciplinary arts nonprofit that uses the arts as a platform to build community. So we're a local arts agency that both supports existing arts activities in our community and also develops our own projects and programming. ArtsLink believes in the power of creativity to positively transform communities, and that creativity really thrives in an open, supportive, and diverse culture. Specifically, our mission is to unify, enrich, and enliven our community via the arts. So a little bit of background on how we got to this program today. So on May 25th, 2020, with the death of George Floyd, a nationwide reckoning around race was triggered, and certainly there was no way to miss or avoid kind of the pain that our country and our world really felt around that. And while doing ArtsLink work, and I'm on a lot of different nonprofit feeds, I saw the nonprofit world sort of blowing up with this. And naturally, I started thinking about the role of arts in addressing social problems, and also what role specifically ArtsLink might have. And I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of fears. I had a lot of, it was painful to look at what happened and kind of look at all the new things that I was learning about. A lot of questions about how our organization in a small, rural, largely white community, what we could do to make a difference, what that might look like. So I saw a lot of great work being done by nonprofits, and that work seemed to be happening very quickly. But I didn't see a lot about process, and I wondered how those organizations were pulling together their anti-racism statements and their plans. So we began talking about this as board back in the late fall of 2020. And board members, I started talking with board members about taking some action around this, and being conscious about how we were developing as an organization and how we were planning our programming. And getting back to the question of the community, and the definition of the community that we serve. So as the Network for Charitable Giving was considering programming options, I offered to share the ArtsLink process, which had begun at that point, and I invited Andrea Jaquish, our Reedsburg ArtsLink board chair, who'd already agreed to lead ArtsLink in the development of their anti-racism statement process. I asked Andrea to join, and then because in our process of kind of looking at what other organizations were doing, we'd studied the American Players Theater's work, and were really impressed with what we saw their organization doing. So Sean Sobecki is also on the board for the Network of Charitable Giving, and I asked Sean to join us for this panel discussion, and he agreed to do so. So Andrea and Sean and I are here in the spirit of exploration and discovery with you. We are not experts on racism or anti-racism. We respect that everyone is present here, coming from a different place in their ideas and thinking around this, and we're not here to teach or, we know that you've all been working on this on your own. So there's been some common language developed around this topic. And so we'll use a variety of terms to have this conversation, because we have to have the conversation, but we're not defining terms, and we're asking you to just hold any question of definitions for your own in your organization's explorations. So I also want to just note that we're obviously an all-white speaker panel today, and our panel had a conversation about that, and we decided to go ahead with this panel because, in part, given the work that we'd already done, we felt it was important to avoid burdening people of color with the responsibility for work that we need to do. So that was part of that decision. So we're just two rural arts nonprofits here in Wisconsin who've been part of this journey, and wherever you or your organizations are at, we hope that this process might offer you some food for thought and some additional support and resources, and just sort of start a conversation. We know that our work in this area will really never be complete. We think that's a good thing, and we're here to learn from you as well today. So both organizations are going to walk through their processes of developing anti-racism visions and action plans, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you might have. So a little bit of housekeeping, though we're not planning to address them until the end. Please feel free to add your questions to the chat box as they arise. And then once we move into the Q&A, you're welcome to unmute yourselves and ask questions. Also, this meeting is being recorded and it will be ultimately posted to the Network for Charitable Giving's website if you'd like to refer to it later or to share it with colleagues or friends. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here today, and I'm going to hand it over to Sean Sobecki with the American Players Theater.
Thanks, Joann. And yeah, just echoing Joann's statements, just thanking everybody for logging on today. And I will say this is my first Zoom presentation. I don't know how I got through almost all of the pandemic without having to give a talking presentation via Zoom. And I will just say that I'm so happy that we are heading towards the path of being back together in a room again, because I'm looking forward to that day when we can do that safely again. So, but thanks for logging on this morning. So my name's Sean Sobecki. I am a development director at American Players Theater. And I've been with APT for 5 years now. And so when Joann asked me to join this panel, I was very excited at the prospect of doing that. And with the caveat that I'm sure I stressed to her too was that, you know, I'll speak from my vantage point as somebody in the organization, but just, you know, I'm representing APT today, but what I'm talking about is kind of how I'm perceiving APT's work in this field. And I just also wanted to echo what Joann said, that you know, we are all white, but I think that's part of the conversation that has been had throughout this past year, that it is our conversation too. It is our conversation to have as well as white people. So so thanks for coming. So at APT, we I want to just briefly talk about in my 5 years with the organization, kind of how the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, we shorten that by saying EDI often. And so our work in that, I feel like has really progressed over those 5 years that I've been with the company. And it kind of starts with, we have some people within our organization that have been just great voices to have in the room. And that one of those people is one of our actors, Melissa Pereira, who she came as an actor to American Players Theater, and has become, she was the first person of color that that APT brought in to our core acting company, which is our kind of a residency program of 13 actors who work a little bit more closely with APT. And so she was a kind of a great voice to have in the room that kind of put the pedal to the metal for APT to really get into the work of EDI and bringing in new voices. And since that time, we've really worked hard to, especially on the stage, in our performances, in the plays that we are producing, focus on bringing another term that we like to use is BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, or Peoples of Color. So bringing BIPOC, more BIPOC voices to APT and telling and representing, you know, having better representation on the stage. I mean, that's something that I think we were going down the right path with. And subsequently, in 2018, we also started to work with Penumbra Theater, is a theater company in St. Paul, Minnesota, sorry, and working within the Twin Cities. And their work is primarily focused on the African American experience, and they produce plays as well as do a lot of outreach and education in the world of equity training and racial biases and all sorts of stuff. So their artistic director, Sarah Bellamy, has worked with us since 2018 in a consultation role to, she's provided trainings for staff and our board, and has consulted with us on our larger EDI work, and specifically on our anti-racism vision and action plan. So just wanted to call out Sarah for all of her work. And if you look up Penumbra Theater, there's lots of wealth of resources that they provide that in this work that they do well. So like Joann said, really last year we are coming up on a year ago that this major world event happened with the murder of George Floyd, and how that sparked this movement and way of talking about things, and specifically in the theater industry, in the professional theater world, there was a collective of BIPOC theater makers that got together and really laid out a plan, they kind of called the industry together to say, in the wake of this terrible tragedy and these terrible tragedies that continue to happen in our country, we want to address these issues that are happening specific to the theater industry in the history of American theater, and things that need to change. So I will put here, in case anybody is interested, I'm going to put into the chat their website. There's a collective called We See You White American Theater, and they really, I will say for APT, we are grateful to this collective of BIPOC theater makers and artists for really laying out the groundwork from which we could build our vision and action plan. And that's essentially what we did. So once we, all of the work that we have done leading up to this, and then spurned by with all of this work that We See White American Theater put out, we kind of took that groundwork. They provided they have a 30-page document of demands that they get very specific into work environment and all sorts of areas. And so what we did at APT was kind of take that information in and then process it as APT, and kind of take it through our organization and figure out the things that we could do as our organization, what is not feasible for us to do, and really work to provide answers to this group and to the rest of American theater as what we as APT are prepared to do in the terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so I will also post here our plan that we decided to come up with. So our plan was our leadership team. It includes our artistic director, Brenda DeVita, and our managing director, Carrie Van Hallgren, as well as our director of communications, our production manager, and our operations manager. Those are our leadership team. And so the vision and action plan was essentially drafted by our leadership team in consultation with Melissa Pereira and Gavin Lawrence, who is another core company actor who is a BIPOC person. And so they consulted with the leadership team as well as an EDI committee of our board of directors. And so those were kind of the group of people that were hashing out over Zoom for many, many weeks, combing through the We See White American Theater documents, combing through our own value statements. Our APT, we have our values document that we hold near and dear to our hearts. And they kind of drafted the initial plan as they best sought, and then came to the rest of our year-round staff and the full board and our core company actors to vet the plan and provide our feedback and input. And then we ultimately decided to publish it on our website and make it public, partly because there was a sense in the theater community that we needed this information needed to be public. Everybody needs to hold each other accountable and invite each other into the conversation. And so let's all put it out there and say what we're doing. So I won't go through exactly our plan. It's quite detailed, and you can feel free to view it as you see fit. But essentially, what this I just want to talk about a bit about the process in that from my vantage point of once the plan has been posted, it's just the beginning, really. It's just the first step or a first step in this process. I think we view at APT, we view this our vision and action plan as a living document, and it provides it's a place that we can go to view our decisions against, to make sure that we are doing things like we set out to do, and it's a document that once we have crossed an item off of that action list, we can reevaluate and add more things to the action plan and reassess. And so that's what our hope is. We put our this plan out last July, and at APT we are also as a staff, we meet once a month to talk about our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. It's we have spent most of the year talking about the We See You White American Theater Collective and going through their statements and demands and viewing that, talking about that in terms of APT. And it's just also, we are finding that it's this work, it's like a muscle, it needs to be trained. And so the getting the plan in place is just one step, but it's really continuing to work and build that muscle that then creates the change. So that's why we are talking about it on a monthly basis, if not more often. And we will continue to work with Sarah Bellamy and Penumbra Theater for more trainings and just continue the work. And one other just key takeaway that I wanted to bring up, since my role as a fundraiser and so many of us are in that fundraising role, I think having a plan in place, I think we've already started to see at APT that we're putting programming, we're building programming with our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts in mind. And so we're already seeing that there are funding opportunities specifically related to our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. And I think we will only continue to see that more, not only with specific programming for this purpose, but general operations. I think grantors and other funding organizations are only going to continue to ask what your organization is doing in EDI efforts. So so I think it is now is a great time to get into the work and continue it, because there is also funding opportunities that will come with it. So that's me talking for way too long and mumbling a bit, but I'm going to pass it over to Andrea and Joann to talk a little bit more about Reedsburg ArtsLink's process specifically.
Thanks, Sean. My name is Andrea Jaquish, And I am currently the board chairperson of Reedsburg ArtsLink. So I appreciate you having me today. And it's been really great learning more about the Network for Charitable Giving and being part of your work as well and expanding what we do. Thanks to Joann for inviting me to this. Let's see, just a little bit about my background before I jump into more about ArtsLink's process. I, like Joann, was born and raised in Reedsburg, and thanks to her for sharing, touching a little bit on the pre-European history of our hometown. Always good to know. And my background has been a lot about exploring and valuing diversity in my professional career as an educator. I have been teaching English as a second language in high schools and colleges here in Wisconsin at MATC, and also previously I lived in New Mexico for a number of years, which was definitely a big experience and a big change from living and growing up in Reedsburg. And prior to that, after college, I went to the Peace Corps, where I kind of got my toes wet in being in being a minority in an African village, basically. And it really, that's, one of the experiences that has really opened my eyes to the value of bringing together experiences and listening and sharing and inclusion. So I was really honored to help facilitate ArtsLink's process to develop an anti-racism statement and to get us on board with and help to lead the conversation that, previously had been less available to small organizations like ArtsLink, or less, maybe not available, but the opportunity hadn't been taken in the past. So I really appreciate that Joann brought to the board and involved us and said, we want to do something about this. We need to take a stand. We need to make this be a very prominent part of our organization. So also, I just want to reflect a little bit on what Sean brought up about APT. This was really interesting to me to hear the process that APT went through. And I just want to kind of point out the contrast in processes, I guess, and in organizations. So Sean really highlighted the level that APT is at, where they are very tapped into the national scene. They have this platform and they have resources at a national level that facilitated their work. And I think that's sounds like it was a super helpful part of their process. And then to turn to ArtsLink, Reedsburg ArtsLink, a 100% volunteer-run organization in a small town in Wisconsin. Our process looked so much different, which is great, and which is, I think, the point of why we are here to share this, that every organization is going to have their set of resources and what they have available to them and their own community to both draw from and reach out to. So I'll just continue here sharing a bit about our process at ArtsLink. Let's see. So just like very similar to the APT process, we, of course, first assessed our tools. What organizations do we know of? What workshops had Joann been attending, and what had folks been saying about, I mean, this was obviously particularly in the summer of 2020 and the fall of 2020, due to George Floyd's death and the prominence of Black Lives Matters on the national stage. A lot of folks were, I think, reflecting and learning and exploring these issues, especially, at least in my little world. I was noticing a lot of folks that I knew who were opening themselves up to conversations in new ways. And the board was really receptive when Joann brought the idea to create an anti-racism statement to the table, which was enormously helpful. Everybody jumped in willingly, and we decided to create an anti-racism statement committee. So we began in the late fall, like Joann said, with some meetings to just kind of sort ourselves out, figure out what we needed to do. And it became clear really early on that we had to make this our own process. As many tools as were available, and we've got a resource sheet that we'll be happy to share with you. I looked and looked for, like, let's have some steps we can follow. Let's just, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Other organizations are doing this. Maybe there's a procedure, a process out there already. And it just didn't seem like that was there for us in the way that it wouldn't fit. There were many tools, and at the same time, we needed to create our own process, and basically we needed to do the work as an organization, as a board. It was our process to do, not anything we could get externally. So that said, we did have a mostly white board at the time. So that also, presented an interesting point of view, or not an uninteresting point of view, as the case may be. And we had, recently elected our first person of color to the board, who graciously agreed to be part of the anti-racism statement committee. So through our as we started, and through our initial meetings, and as we were kind of carving our path here, we came up with a few things that paved the way for us. We started by recognizing what each of us on the committee, what each board member brought to the table, that we all came from different places, different experiences, different interests, different levels of learning and understanding, different professional involvement with anti-racism. And we did kind of a self-assessment and getting on the same page about where we were as a group. In doing that, we created a set of group norms so that we could have what we knew would be difficult conversations. We knew that people have varying reactions and capacities to have conversations about racism and anti-racism. And we wanted to create a container, like a safe space, to be able to make mistakes if that, as that was inevitable. And I guess let me share quickly our norms. I'll share it in a second with a more full sheet. I see my time is maybe flying. So the process then that we went through is we started to define our goal. we wanted to have, our committee wanted to have not just a statement, but something meaningful that reflected our values and something that took action. We definitely were interested in seeing action happen. And this was also when we got real with our limitations and our fears, and things that came up were like, how will the community respond to us? How will the community participate in this process? How will the community get behind this or react? So we were concerned about all those things. We realized that, you know, we just needed to start. It didn't matter what the limitations were, because we had to be realistic with what we were working with. And another kind of hot topic that came up, and I think Sean mentioned this also, was this idea that in rural white areas, folks may not see the relevance, but maybe we're actually not as homogenous as we believe. We really got to, I think Joann pointed this out before, that really took us into defining, redefining, opening our minds to understand who is our community? What is the community of Reedsburg? Who are we serving here? So the next couple steps that this led us to were to taking inventory. We decided we needed to go back in the history of ArtsLink organization, which fortunately wasn't too far. We're a fairly young organization. And so we stepped in there, although that could be scary. We decided we needed to look and see how we as an organization had been complicit in racist systems, in upholding racist systems. And so instead of looking at that as like, oh, what have we been doing wrong? It was really a natural process for us to take the opportunity to look at how well and have an assessment how well we have been serving our community. So, you know, we wanted to know, what perspectives have we been missing? How have we been blind to what folks might need or might appreciate? And again, who even is our community? What is this made up of? The other thing that I mentioned also was that we wanted to ground this statement that we were creating into actual tangible work. We do a lot of programming, outreach. We have a strategic plan in place. And what we decided as a committee is that we needed to see not just a statement up on the website that had, you know, a few words that sounded good. We wanted this to be an integral part of the organization, and we wanted to incorporate it into our values and make sure that every action that was taken by the organization was taken from this place of anti-racism. So, you know, at that point, we kind of came up with some ideas too, and, you know, concrete things that got put out into the, you know, the ideas were flowing. So I will just very quickly share my, let's see, our kind of overall, I have a little graphic organizer that I like to use. My background as a teacher took over here. So here is kind of what I envisioned of this looking like for our organization. So having a central value statement or anti-racism statement, and then we would have these spokes going out that were explaining or that were the actual tangible ways that we were integrating what we were saying, you know, putting our money where our mouths are. I think I got that wrong. Where the rubber meets the road. We'll go with that one. So, you know, we have just a couple of ideas here, but we wanted language accessibility on the website. We wanted BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, youth scholarships. We want to extend our board recruitment and make our board much more inclusive. So, you know, these are just a few examples. And we are actually currently still in the process of finalizing our statement and of putting together this, recognizing how these spokes can be carrying the work forward that we do. And so filling in this document as an ongoing process for the organization. And like Sean mentioned, as a way for us to hold ourselves accountable to ourselves and to our organization, and to have this conversation that is a much longer conversation. It's not going to be wrapped up nicely with a little bow ever. I mean, and that's not the intention. So yeah, I guess I will stop talking and turn it over for questions and the drawing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea and Sean. Really appreciate what you shared. And so, yeah, I think we have about at least 7 minutes left for questions. If we finish right at 9, I guess I will leave this to you, Charlie, but why don't we just jump right into questions with the time that we have remaining? Comments, would love to hear how this is, how you're receiving this, and any thoughts that are coming up for you. Please just remember to unmute yourselves and go ahead and shoot, I'd like to hear from you.
I'll try one. That's okay. Have you received any feedback from the BIPOC community from your efforts, whether they think this is a positive thing, whether they think it's meaningful?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We have heard from some BIPOC people that are in our APT community already, that work with APT and have worked with APT, and we've gotten good feedback on it, with the caveat that the plan itself, as long as it's not just a piece of paper, as long as they know that that the work is actually being done. Somebody else has put it like, as long as you're walking the talk as well. And so luckily people, I think at APT we've been working hard to put, address some of, start to address our action plan and put those steps in motion. And so yeah, that's where the positive feedback has come, is that they can see that statement and also see the work that is being done in front of them as well.
Thank you.
And for Reedsburg ArtsLink, we're at a point where we've just created a draft statement that we're now circulating, and we'll be circulating that within, among different folks for feedback on whether, this feels right, is resonating. And so we're looking forward to that. And I think you bring up a really good point, Jim. I think that feedback is really important. Yeah.
I'm going to kind of piggyback on Jim's question. This is Melanie Sines. I'm the director of Little Eagle Arts Foundation, nonprofit. We've got our studio down at Mawakanchunk, also known as Badger Ordnance. So I do a lot of diversity training across the country. I used to work for a National Association of Independent Schools. And one of the biggest things in terms of developing a sense of equity in regards to race? Because it seems like within the what we call the big 8 of social identifiers, you guys are focusing exclusively on race. What are you doing to develop trust amongst your community? And this includes not only your white allies, but also the Black and Indigenous and people of color within your community as you develop these statements.
I think that's a great question, Melanie. I don't know if we're able to gauge the trust that we're developing with the community, and I would love to hear from you. Your thoughts on ways that trust can be developed.
Well, I think it's a human attribute, isn't it? Like amongst friends, you know what level of confidentiality you can engage in. I think it's the same thing with community. I mean, if our arts organizations or nonprofits reflect our community, I mean, we should work toward developing a sense of trust, because in essence, it's our audience that we're developing, isn't it? As we develop these anti-racism statements, because we want our audience who's sitting there at our public programs to be, all sorts of different faces and ages and abilities and socioeconomics, right?
Well, maybe, yes, thank you, Melanie. And another ArtsLink board member, Sam Reese, is in the group, I know, and I don't want to put Sam on the spot, but when we were talking with Sam about becoming an ArtsLink board member, I know that trust and safety was a question, was an issue. Sam, would you care to say anything? And if you don't, that's fine.
While she thinks about that or jumps on, if she chooses, I will say that I think that is a priority for ArtsLink, is to develop a board that is inclusive and that mirrors the greater community. And so we have made it a priority to recruit board members who are people of color and who are active in our community. And I think that's one way to bridge trust, is by, reflecting back to the community what they are.
Yeah, this is Sam, I guess.
Hi, Sam.
But,
okay.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that having this anti-racism statement and our anti-discrimination statements and stuff like that has really helped ArtsLink build a bridge for more people of color to be able to feel comfortable joining the group versus other organizations that might not feel comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations that are very true and very I guess honest. There's groups I was on a board and I left because of comments that were not very people of color friendly, I guess we'll say, from board members, from quote unquote leaders. But that's also because they didn't feel like having these awkward conversations. They didn't think that an anti-racism statement was necessary in Reedsburg. They didn't think that an anti-discrimination statement was necessary in Reedsburg. So I think that having this statement that we are developing through ArtsLink is really going to be able to help see more people or have more people see ArtsLink as a safe area to join, because there is a pretty big community in Reedsburg that isn't very well represented through nonprofit organizations in our community, which is very unfortunate. But I know that as myself, I tend to be the only Hispanic person on any board. I am on ArtsLink and many of the city boards, and I am the only one typically in the room. So it's kind of, I'm hoping that this statement will help bridge a connection with more people for them to know that it's safe for them to join groups. It's safe for them to have a voice. Yeah, so hope that answers the question.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I really appreciate what you shared.
Well, I see that we have reached the bewitching hour here. In the meantime, I've been in communication on and off with Lori. Somehow she got bumped off the call altogether, and I suggested that she try dialing in again. And Sean, you said that you haven't been able to see anything coming from Lori. She also sent me the random software, the tool that she was going to use, and I tried to download it, and it was too much too soon. So I said, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather listen to the conversation than try and deal with a piece of software on my computer. What we'll do is this for the drawing is we will do it outside of this call. It's not necessary that it was done on the call, although we thought it would be fun to see the names spinning as Lori demonstrated this tool during our last board meeting. But we'll do that independently, and we will contact the scholarship recipients and let them know the conditions and otherwise. Just a reminder again that Thursday, September 16th is our next quarterly program, 8 o'clock. It will be hopefully in person as well as Zoom. This program has been recorded, and as I understand, Sean, you've been posting recorded programs on our website. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, yep,
Good.
yep.
More than anything, I'd like to thank our panelists today. If you've got any last final comments before we sign off, Joann, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I just want to thank you and the Network for Charitable Giving Board for creating this opportunity today. And again, we appreciate everybody being here. And I think that the three of us want to make ourselves available to any nonprofits that feel like they, you know, whether you're in the middle of a process or you're thinking about starting one, if you're in need of support. I know Andrea has a list of resources that she's planning to share with you. I want to name one that I want you to watch for on the list that Andrea will share. It's outstanding. It will be more than you will ever need, not specifically about creating an anti-racism statement, but just about like sort of the whole thing. And that is the United Way. Has a 21-week program, and you can do it at your own pace. It's very comprehensive. You can do as much or as little as you like. I really recommend checking that out if you're looking for a place to get started. So other than that, I don't have anything else to add unless Sean or Andrea wants to kind of say a final word. Just wish everybody in our group today all the best as they kind of think about and process this and you know, within their own organizations kind of take even baby steps.
And I would also encourage, Sean, you shared a couple of interesting links, and I looked at the APT statement, which is really great because you've got an action plan and timeline and otherwise. And maybe Joann and Andrea, if you've got some materials, we can post them on our website. Again, the website is pretty straightforward. It's charitablenetwork.org, or just type in, you know, Network for Charitable Giving, and that will come up. So we'll try and load that with as many resources as possible in the coming days. And again, these links will be available at some point in time so that you can share with others. I'd say thanks again to our panelists. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you in a couple of months. Bye, everybody.